Hi, welcome to today's instalment in my series on the Fall of Anne Boleyn, which of course took place in 1536. I'm with you just giving you a day-by-day look at the events that led up to Queen Anne Boleyn's execution on the 19th of May. Okay, on this day in 1536, the 16th of May of course, Sir William Kingston, who was Constable of the Tower of London and therefore Queen Anne Boleyn's jailer, reported something strange in his daily report to Thomas Cromwell. He wrote, "At this day at dinner, the Queen said that she should go to a nunnery and is in hope of life." So a very strange thing to write. This was just a day after Anne had been found guilty by a jury of her peers of high treason. Just a day after she'd been sentenced to death for treason. How very, very odd. Now, what had happened on this day? What on earth could have led to Anne saying that? Was she just in some kind of dream, in some kind of state where she was just hoping for something that really couldn't happen? Or was it down to something that had happened that day? It's really hard to know. But on that day, Anne had received a visit from her good friend, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. He'd been sent to the Tower to visit Anne, to act as her confessor, to take her last confession, and to obtain her consent to the annulment of her marriage to Henry VIII. Now, had something happened at this meeting between Archbishop and Queen to lead Anne to believe that she might yet be saved, that there was some hope of her going into exile or joining a convent? It makes you wonder if perhaps Cranmer had offered her some kind of deal. You know, if she consented to the annulment of the marriage, then she could be sent to a nunnery instead of being sent to the scaffold. Had Cranmer been led to believe by Thomas Cromwell and the King that that could happen? I can't believe Thomas Cranmer misleading his friend the Queen himself. Perhaps he'd been misled, or was this Anne just clutching at straws and thinking, if I'm obedient now, you know, perhaps they will pardon me, or perhaps I'll just be able to sort of, you know, ride off into the sunset and keep my head. We will obviously never know unless more evidence comes to light, but it's such an odd thing for Anne to say to Sir William Kingston. In another part of the Tower of London on this day in 1536, 5 men were preparing for their executions, which were scheduled for the next day. They were waiting to make their last confessions, Sir William Kingston reported to Cromwell. Their confessor hadn't arrived yet, but they were waiting to make their last confessions. Sir Francis Weston took this opportunity, this time, to write a letter of farewell to his parents. With this letter, he included a list of his debts for them to settle on his behalf. And in this letter, he wrote, "Father and mother and wife, I shall humbly desire you, for the salvation of my soul, to discharge me of this bill, and for to forgive me of all the offences that I have done to you, and in especial to my wife, which I desire for the love of God to forgive me, and to pray for me, for I believe prayer will do me good. God's blessing have my children and mine, by me a great offender to God." Now, we should in no way take that as him confessing to being guilty of, you know, the charges laid against him, because it is important to remember that these people believed that they were deserving of death because of original sin. even if they weren't guilty of the offences for which they were being executed or tried for and executed for, they were deserving of that death on the scaffold because of original sin and other sins that they had committed during their life. George Boleyn, Lord Rochford, was also preparing for his death. He had debts as well on his mind. He had actually fretted about this issue the whole time of his imprisonment in the Tower of London. Sir William Kingston had reported what a state George Boleyn was in, and was there anything that Cromwell could do to ease his conscience, because he was just consumed with worry during his imprisonment about money. Worrying that those he owed money to would not be paid because of his death, and that those who owed him money would end up getting into trouble if they had to pay the king instead. And when I read Sir William Kingston's letters about George fretting in this way and just being consumed with worry, I just find it so sad that somebody that should have just been concentrating on worrying about themselves and their forthcoming death was instead being just consumed with worry for others and whether they would suffer because he was dying. It's just awful what these people went through during their imprisonment, that their last days were spent worrying like that. So yeah, it just makes these people feel, well, seems so real, and they were real. And I do think that sometimes people, especially when they say, oh, karma, this person's execution was karma, I think we forget that these aren't people from Game of Thrones. They're not characters. They're real people. They're real people who had real families. They suffered. They were really executed. And we kind of lose touch sometimes with that, especially when we read so much historical fiction and see things like the Tudors and stuff on TV where it's more entertainment. But these were real people, and I think reading letters and their own words just brings home to us and gives us that link with them. Sorry to rant and rave there, but it just makes me so sad reading the primary sources and these people's words. Anyway, that's this day in 1536. I'll be back tomorrow with another day from 1536. Of course, do watch the other videos from the 24th of April, I think I started, just so that you can get a real insight into the events of 1536. You can subscribe to this channel by clicking round about there. You can hit the bell to be notified of new videos as they go live. But do have a good browse of this channel. There's so much information on Tudor history, the Boleyns, the monarchs. There's all sorts for you to enjoy and for you to get your Tudor fix. I'll be back tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.